What? He dares to fire me when I'm enjoying my first vacation in 17 years? This is crazy. Ah!
Hey man, I think I can help you.
The moment I heard the scream through my phone, I almost dropped my drink. Not because of the volume, though, it could have woken a volcano, but because of who was yelling and where I was when he did. It was my first vacation in 17 years. Maui, ocean wind, palm trees, and me. Finally breathing like a human instead of a walking algorithm. Then came the line that sliced the air in half. You abandoned your post during drought forecast week, Jonah. Are you insane? You're fired. Effective immediately. For a second, I just stared at my phone, convinced coconut water had leaked into my ears and distorted reality. Fired. On a beach. By a man who had been CEO for 23 days. The shock hit first, quick and clean, but what followed was worse. A laugh rising in my chest, sharp and uncontrollable. I bit the inside of my cheek, trying not to burst out cackling right there on the sand. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from. By the way, a slightly tragic fun fact: about 95% of you are listening but still haven't subscribed, which honestly hurts more than getting fired under a palm tree. So go ahead, tap that subscribe button. You'll get every news story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. His voice kept going, shrill and panicked, but I barely heard him. Because while my brand new boss, Cole Harrington, all of 29 years old with a resume built more on investor favoritism than competence, was screaming about professionalism, something far more interesting caught my attention. The man on the lounger beside me lowered his sunglasses. At first, I thought he was just annoyed by the noise. Then recognition slammed into me. Elliot Crane, the polished, unbothered CEO of FarmMind Robotics, the biggest rival TerraHarvest AI ever had. The same rival our board promised we would crush one day. He arched an eyebrow. Calm as a monk. Rough call, he asked. I swallowed another laugh and muted my phone, letting Cole's rant dissolve into digital silence. The absurdity nearly knocked me sideways. Here I was, Jonah Price, 51, the man who built TerraHarvest's entire forecasting backbone, finally taking a vacation, only to be fired by a kid who still pronounced algorithm like it had a silent G. Jai, and sitting directly beside me was the one man our company considered untouchable competition. I leaned back in my chair, heat from the sun warming my face, and whispered more to myself than to him. You have no idea. Elliot. Absolutely no idea where this is going. Elliot didn't say anything at first. He simply watched me power off my phone and sink back into the lounge chair as the last of Cole's rant dissolved into the ocean wind. For a moment, the only sound between us was the slow roll of the waves. Then he lifted his sunglasses again, studying me with a thoughtful expression I hadn't seen in years, an expression that suggested someone was finally paying attention. You know, he said, tapping the side of his glass, TerraHarvest is unbelievably stupid. I blinked, unsure I'd heard him right. He continued, voice calm and almost amused. You're the reason SoilSense AI hasn't been sued off the face of the earth for the last 7 years. Something inside me paused, like my entire body needed a moment to process what those words meant. Compliments weren't exactly the currency of TerraHarvest. At best, you got a nod in the hallway. At worst, well, you got fired on a beach for daring to rest. But this was different. Warmth bloomed slowly in my chest, almost unfamiliar. I'd forgotten what it felt like to hear genuine acknowledgement. Not forced, not calculated, not given because a report demanded it. A real, human recognition of years of invisible work. Elliot leaned back, still watching me. Jonah, SoilSense's failure rate was at 18% before you rebuilt the predictive engine. Afterward, 2%. People in my position notice things like that. I didn't know whether to laugh or stare at the sky in disbelief. For years. TerraHarvest treated my work like oxygen, necessary but unmentionable. I always told myself the silence meant I was doing a good job. But hearing Elliot say it out loud brought a strange ache to my chest, something halfway between gratitude and mourning. Funny, I said quietly. No one at TerraHarvest ever put it that way. That's because they couldn't afford to. Elliot replied, in fact, they tried to push you out 2 years ago. My head snapped toward him. What are you talking about? He didn't hesitate. The drought modeling scandal. The adjusted variance paper they buried. They manipulated the forecast data to keep investors calm. You flagged it. They needed someone to blame for raising the alarm. I felt the warmth in my chest shift, solidifying into something firmer, heavier, not anger, not shock, something deeper, the confirmation of a truth I'd quietly suspected, but never dared articulate. They said the variance glitch was a system anomaly. I murmured. Elliot gave a soft, humorless laugh. Jonah, you were the anomaly. You were the only one they couldn't control. The words landed with quiet force, and for the first time in a very long time. I felt something straighten inside me, something tired but unbroken. My worth wasn't gone. It had simply been waiting for someone honest enough to name it. If you look closely, there's a hidden signal right in this frame. By the time my flight touched down in California, the warmth from Maui had already faded, replaced by a familiar tightness spreading across my chest. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was only fatigue. But the moment I opened my apartment door, the silence felt heavier than usual. I set my suitcase down, powered up my company laptop, half expecting my access to be revoked, and waited for the inevitable spinning icon to clear. When the dashboard finally loaded, the screen hit me harder than Cole's chaotic phone call ever did. The drought forecasting server, the one I had spent years refining, was flashing a 34% error margin. 34. That number wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic. It meant entire counties were preparing for the wrong weather patterns. It meant crops could fail. It meant someone had tampered with an engine that had no business being touched. My stomach sank. I clicked deeper, and the next alert made me rub my temples in disbelief. Our automated irrigation drones had activated at 2 a.m. 2 o'clock when temperatures were lowest, evaporation non-existent, and water use painfully inefficient. Farmers would wake up to soaked fields and ruined soil balance, all because someone believed they could simplify a system built to be precise. I kept scrolling. Red banners filled the screen one after another, urgent complaints, data misalignments, unresolved tickets. Every message pointed to the same truth: I'd been gone for 4 days, and TerraHarvest was coming apart at the seams. Part of me felt a dull, throbbing sadness, not for Cole, not for the executives who pretended to understand my work, but for the farmers who depended on stable forecasting to keep their land alive. They were the ones who would suffer first. Then I opened the internal communications log, and that was where the pain sharpened into something quieter, heavier, almost bitterly poetic. A senior engineer had posted a frantic message in the overnight channel who approved the new CEO deleting Jonah Price's algorithm. We're about to set the entire sector on fire. For a long moment, I just stared at those words. Deleted my algorithm. The same algorithm that kept TerraHarvest afloat for years. The same algorithm Cole once called overly complicated because it didn't fit on a PowerPoint slide. I didn't swear. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I simply exhaled, slow and exhausted, letting the absurdity settle like dust. By the time I closed the laptop, the room felt colder than before, as if the collapse on the screen had seeped into the air around me. I didn't feel anger anymore, only understanding. This was what I had predicted would happen when Cole believed he could outsmart the system now. If you think it's obvious, don't comment. If it's not obvious, just say it. Walking into FarmMind Robotics the next morning felt strangely similar to walking into a future I had forgotten I once imagined. The building was all glass and sunlight, clean lines and quiet efficiency. Nothing like the flickering fluorescent halls of TerraHarvest. Even the air felt different, cooler, sharper, almost intentional. I'd come expecting a conversation, maybe an offer, maybe just curiosity. What I didn't expect was a sense of clarity washing over me before I even reached the elevator. Elliot was waiting in a conference room on the top floor, sleeves rolled up, a tablet in one hand and a look on his face that told me this meeting wasn't casual. He nodded toward the seat across from him. Jonah, sit. There's something you need to see. The lights dimmed slightly as he tapped the tablet, and a large projection appeared on the glass wall behind him. It was a regional drought impact forecast, except not the one TerraHarvest had published before I left. This one was worse, much worse. Entire sections of the Midwest were painted in alarming shades of red. If soil sense isn't repaired within 10 days, Elliot said calmly. 7 states will experience crop failures, some mild, some severe, but all preventable. He paused, letting the weight of that settle over us. We've been monitoring TerraHarvest's errors since you left. Their system is spiraling faster than we expected. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something far more grounding purpose. For the first time since my firing, I didn't feel discarded. I felt needed, necessary. Like the part of me TerraHarvest dismissed as obsolete had suddenly become valuable again. "I'm not here to overwhelm you," Elliot continued. "I'm here because we can still fix this, but not without you." He leaned forward, eyes steady. "So I'll ask plainly, are you willing to rebuild the future of American agriculture?" The words struck deeper than he knew. Rebuild, not patch, not consult, rebuild. I felt something warm stir inside me, the feeling I used to have years ago, before exhaustion replaced ambition, a flicker of belief in my own work. Before I could answer, Elliot tapped again, bringing up a second display, this time a list of names, 14 of them. Some I recognized instantly: multi-state farming cooperatives, major commercial growers, long-standing partners TerraHarvest depended on. They reached out to us in the last 48 hours. He explained, "Most want to transition immediately, but they all added the same condition." He turned the tablet so I could read it clearly. "They'll only move forward if you oversee the forecasting systems." The words blurred for a moment as something inside me tightened: pain, gratitude, and resolve mixing in a way I hadn't felt in years. 14 massive clients didn't just want a new provider. They wanted me. When I finally looked up, Elliot was watching carefully, waiting, and for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I felt my confidence return with the slow, steady certainty of a sunrise. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'm ready." There was something in the back that no one expected. Returning to TerraHarvest felt like walking back into a house I once built, but no longer lived in. Everything looked the same on the surface: the polished cement floors, the artificial greenery, the endless motivational posters pretending this place valued innovation. But underneath, the energy had shifted. People weren't walking with purpose anymore. They were drifting, eyes down, shoulders hunched, like they were waiting for impact. I kept my expression neutral, trying not to let the sting in my chest show. This had been my second home for 17 years, yet now every step felt like trespassing. As I passed the analytics wing, someone rushed up beside me. It was Theo, a young engineer I had trained during his internship. His face was pale, his voice barely a whisper. "Jonah, thank God you're here. The AI watered 4 times last night. 4. The whole state is roasting us alive." He swallowed hard. "People think it's sabotage." I forced myself to remain calm. "It's not sabotage," I said quietly. "It's incompetence." Theo's eyes darted nervously toward the hallway behind us. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered, "but Cole told the board the system malfunctioned because your code was outdated." He used air quotes, then added, "But everyone saw the commit logs. He wiped your modules the second you left." A bitter laugh rose in my throat, sharp and unwelcome. I swallowed it down. Of course he did. We parted ways as I approached the operations hub, where screens showed live drone activity and irrigation metrics. Every chart was red. Every forecast error bar was spiking. Yet in the middle of this digital disaster, there stood Cole, arms crossed, chin high, wearing the smug confidence of someone who had no idea he was steering a ship straight into a cliff. "Jonah," he said, smiling like we were old friends meeting for lunch. "Glad you came in to return our property." God help me. I almost admired the delusion. I didn't answer him. Instead, I stepped past and logged into a diagnostic console. Cole hovered behind me, pretending to understand what he was looking at. What loaded on the screen, however, wiped the fake confidence off his face in seconds. My algorithm's core signature was still there. The lattice structure I spent years perfecting, the encoded time-stamped watermark, the predictive correction loops intact. Not overwritten, not replaced, just buried under a glossy new interface Cole must have slapped together after watching one too many YouTube tutorials. The realization hit me so hard I had to grip the desk to stop myself from laughing. Not polite laughter, not professional laughter, full-blown, comedic, can't-breathe laughter. Because in trying to erase me, Cole had only erased the part he understood the visuals, while the actual intelligence of the system remained untouched, quietly screaming for help beneath his amateur design. I straightened slowly, turning to him with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. "You didn't delete my work," I said softly. "You just painted over it." Cole blinked. "That's not possible." I couldn't stop the smirk. "That I said, is exactly why everything is flooding. If you leave here, you will miss the most important thing. I had barely made it home from TerraHarvest when my phone lit up again, vibrating across the kitchen counter like it was trying to escape. I stared at the screen, already knowing who it was before the caller ID flashed. Part of me considered letting it ring out, another part colder. Clearer answered anyway, if only to hear how far the fall had gone. Cole didn't bother with a greeting. He came in screaming, Jonah, what the hell are you doing? Are you pulling clients to farm mind? Are you trying to destroy me? I'm going to lose my seat on the board. Do you hear me? I'm going to lose everything. You need to fix this. You need to save me. I leaned back against the counter, watching the late afternoon light stretch across my living room. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, almost calm. Cole, I said, I'm folding laundry. He sputtered. What does that mean? It means, I continued, slowly lifting another shirt from the basket, that I'm not working for you, not thinking about you, and not responsible for the mess you made. The silence on his end cracked, jagged and panicked. You don't understand these customers, these people. They're all saying they want you. They're threatening cancellation unless I bring you back. Tell them something. Tell them you're staying out of this. A humorless smile tugged at my lips. Cole, I didn't tell a single soul anything. They're leaving because they trust the person who built the system, not the person who broke it. You think I broke it? His voice cracked upward in disbelief. I closed the laundry basket. I don't think. Cole, I saw. Soil sense is crashing. The drones are watering fields like drunk toddlers, and the forecast variance 34% out of range. If that's not broken, I don't know what is. His breathing quickened. Because you left. Because you abandoned us. There it was, the last line of defense for men who never accept responsibility. I let the silence stretch. Cool and controlled. Cole, I said finally, I gave TerraHarvest 17 years. You fired me because I went on vacation. That was a mistake, he snapped. Okay, a stupid mistake. But Jonah, listen, if you don't come back, the whole system will collapse. TerraHarvest will collapse. The board already wants answers, and his voice dropped to a shaky whisper. I can't read your code. That admission hit harder than I expected, not because I felt pity, but because it confirmed everything I had tried to warn him about. He had taken control of a machine he didn't understand. You're saying the quiet part out loud now, I murmured. Please, he whispered. If you walk away, I'm finished. I exhaled, feeling something uncoil inside me. Months, years of tension dissolving all at once. Cole, I said softly, I didn't ruin you. You did that yourself, and for the first time since Maui, I felt entirely, unbelievably free by the time I arrived at FarmMind the next morning. The weight of Cole's desperate phone call still lingered in my thoughts. I expected another strategy discussion, maybe an update on the clients preparing to transition. What I didn't expect was Elliot standing in the lobby, holding a printed document like it was something volatile. Jonah, he said quietly, you need to see this. We walked to his office, and he handed me the letter. At first glance, it looked like any formal federal correspondence official seal, structured formatting, unemotional language. But the moment my eyes reached the center paragraph, the world tilted. The forecasting system authored by Mr. Jonah Price shows evidence of unauthorized manipulation due to the national risk associated with inaccurate drought predictions. The U.S. Department of Agriculture formally requests Mr. Price to lead the Emergency Agricultural Stabilization Initiative. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands went cold. The federal government wasn't just aware of the system I built, they were monitoring it. And now, they were asking me to lead a national response project. Me, a man who had been fired on a beach just days earlier by a CEO who couldn't interpret his own error logs. The shock hit so hard, I had to sit down. Elliot took the seat beside me, lowering his voice. Cole touched something he should have never touched, he said. He manipulated the variance coefficients to make the quarterly reports look better. Those changes cascaded through the drought model. If someone hadn't caught it, farmers across 7 states would plant based on false forecasts. I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Jonah, this isn't just about TerraHarvest anymore. This is about the country's food supply. I stared at the letter again, a strange heat building behind my ribs, part disbelief, part pride, part something far heavier. For years, I'd worked in silence, refining systems most people never bothered to understand. And now the federal government was saying those same systems mattered. That I mattered. Elliot touched the edge of the paper and said softly. Cole didn't understand the machine. He didn't understand the responsibility. But you do. And if we do this right, we don't just fix a company. We fix the country. Something tightened in my throat. Tears didn't fall. But the pressure was there, the kind of ache that comes when the world finally says the thing you've been waiting your whole career to hear. I wasn't obsolete. I wasn't replaceable. And I sure as hell wasn't finished. I folded the letter carefully, grounding myself with one steady breath. Elliot, I said, voice rough but certain, tell them yes, here is a small change, but if you don't want to dig deeper, you don't need to pay attention. Stepping into my new office at FarmMind felt surreal in a way I couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't the size of the room or the skyline view stretching all the way to the distant foothills, it was the plaque on the door. Jonah Price, Executive Vice President, National Agritech Operations. The title alone made something warm flicker in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Pride, real, grounded pride, not the hollow kind I used to fake during TerraHarvest's performance reviews. Inside, a small team stood waiting, faces open and genuinely welcoming, not wary, not intimidated, just respectful. Elliot walked in right behind me, clapping a hand on my shoulder as though we'd been colleagues for a decade instead of a week. Everyone, he said. This is the man who's going to help stabilize half the country's agricultural systems. There was no exaggeration in his tone, no sales pitch, just truth. And hearing it said aloud, hearing myself introduced that way, felt like a part of me finally clicked back into place. As the onboarding meeting began, I found myself taking charge almost effortlessly. Not because I was trying to prove anything, but because the room allowed me to be who I already was. I outlined workflow corrections, explained the forecasting variances, and assigned tasks based on strengths rather than politics. Every suggestion was met with nods, focused eyes, and a rapid clacking of keyboards. The difference was staggering. At TerraHarvest, people listened because they were afraid of failure. At FarmMind, they listened because they trusted me. Later that afternoon, Elliot pulled me aside. I want to show you something, he said, guiding me to a monitoring suite where a wall of maps displayed patterns, error logs, and real-time data streams. He zoomed into a cluster of red warning markers across 5 states markers representing the AI failures that had triggered the federal investigation. We finally traced the root cause, he continued. I thought you'd want to see the breakdown. The chart that appeared made my breath catch. 80% of the errors occurred during the exact 7-day period I was on vacation. 7 days. 7 days without me. 7 days with Cole in control. The realization settled over me like a strange mix of vindication and grief. It wasn't that I wanted TerraHarvest to fail. Part of me had spent years keeping it afloat. But seeing the evidence cold, undeniable, was the clearest confirmation yet of everything Elliot had been telling me. It wasn't your system that broke, Elliot said quietly. It was his ego. I exhaled slowly, letting the truth wash through me. The bitterness I expected didn't come. Instead, there was a deep, settling calm. A feeling of standing in my own skin again, after being pushed out of it for far too long. For the first time in years, I felt in control not of a company, not of a crisis, but of myself, my work, my voice, my future. And as I looked out across the glowing maps of fields and farms depending on us, I realized something simple and life-changing. I wasn't just back. I was alive again. I was reviewing the federal task schedule for the upcoming week when Mara, FarmMind's receptionist, knocked gently on my office door. She didn't step inside, she simply leaned in, eyes wide in a way that made me set my tablet down immediately. Jonah, someone is here to see you, she whispered, and he refuses to leave, before I could ask who. A familiar voice echoed through the open lobby behind her, raw, cracked, and nothing like the arrogant bravado I'd grown accustomed to. Jonah, please. I stepped out into the atrium. And there he was, Cole Harrington. His suit was wrinkled like he'd slept in it, his tie was missing, his hair, always perfectly slicked back, hung messily over his forehead. And his eyes, they were red. Not from anger, but from the kind of crying a person tries and fails to hide when he saw me. Something inside him seemed to collapse. Jonah, he breathed. I lost everything. For a moment, I simply observed him. He looked small in a way that had nothing to do with height. Smaller than the title he'd clung to, smaller than the ego he'd used as armor, smaller than the lies he thought he could control. "I'm sure that's difficult," I said quietly. "But Cole, you didn't lose everything because of me. You lost because you thought knowledge was something you could skip. I let each word land. Agriculture doesn't work like TikTok trends. You can't fake expertise. You can't hack your way through science." His mouth trembled, but no sound came out. He handed me a folded document with shaking hands. When I opened it, I immediately recognized the header TerraHarvest's executive board. Below it was a single sentence stating his removal as CEO, but the signature at the bottom stopped me. His wife, the daughter of the same investor who fast-tracked him into power, she had approved the vote to remove him. A slow exhale escaped me, not satisfaction, not cruelty, just the quiet finality of a truth settling into place. "Cole," I said, folding the document back into his hands, "this is your reckoning, not mine." He swallowed hard, voice breaking. I thought I could fix everything before anyone noticed. You couldn't even read the system you were commanding." I replied, "Leadership isn't pretending you know. It's knowing enough to respect what you don't." The silence between us stretched, not hostile, not angry, just honest. Maybe for the first time since he took the role. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he whispered. "I'm not angry," I said. "Just done." He closed his eyes at that, because some endings don't need shouting to be final. When he finally walked out of FarmMind's doors, shoulders slumped, steps heavy, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure, a clean, definitive period at the end of a chapter that should have ended years ago. Cole was finished, and for the first time in 17 years. I wasn't. The next morning, I walked onto the FarmMind observation deck long before the building filled with noise. Dawn was spreading across the fields in slow strokes of gold, catching the wings of the drones as they rose in synchronized arcs over the test crops. For the first time in years, I wasn't watching a system out of obligation or desperation. I was watching because I wanted to, because the work finally felt like mine again. Elliot stepped beside me, coffee in hand, eyes following the drone's flight lines. "Jonah," he said, almost casually. "The board met last night. They want you to prepare for the CTO role." A quiet laugh escaped me, soft, disbelieving, full. "I took one vacation," I said, shaking my head, "and somehow ended up rebuilding an entire industry." He grinned. "Well, some people spend their vacations golfing." I didn't answer immediately. I just watched the sunlight break fully across the land, real farms, real people depending on the technology I built, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle deeply inside me, freedom. Not the fragile kind you get when you escape something, but the grounded kind that comes when you finally step into who you were supposed to be. Later that afternoon, as I reviewed national transition plans, a new message slid into my inbox. The sender's name was unfamiliar, but the tone hit me harder than any headline or board announcement ever could. "Mr. Price, I run a 4th-generation farm in Nebraska. If your system hadn't corrected the forecast last week, we would have lost everything. You saved our season. Don't let anyone take away what you built." I read the message twice, then again, the words blurring as a sting formed behind my eyes. After everything, the firing, the chaos, the accusations. This simple note from a man I'd never met nearly brought me to tears, because it reminded me why I started this work in the first place. In the end, I realized something I wish I'd learned sooner. Your worth isn't determined by who fails to see it, but by the people who rely on the impact you make. And at 51 years old, I finally stepped into a future that valued me back. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone underestimated you, tell me where you're listening from. Your story matters too. And hey, if this journey resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe. More stories like this are on the way, and we're just getting started.